Okay, so as we're getting ready for an assembly, the first thing we want to do is some simple marking. First and foremost, we want to mark the inside versus the outside of this sidewall piece. And it's not difficult to tell if you know what you're looking for, but if you look at the bottom, right, these pins are larger at the inside and narrower at the outside. So this is our outside face. So with a Sharpie, I'm just going to put out. And I'm going to do it at either end. Okay, it makes it much easier to avoid the error of filing, this front dovetail the wrong direction. Okay, so we're going to mark the outside here. We also want to make sure that we keep track of the show or outside faces of the bridge and the front piece. Now, the bridge is symmetrical left to right and top to bottom, okay? But there's a show face and a lower face, okay? The show face is the face where you can see the chamfers, all right? So on the show face, and while this is utterly symmetrical, we do want to pick an orientation and stick with it. So I'm just going to mark, and my habitual marking is to use an arrow that is always on an outside or a show surface pointing towards up, okay? So that's going to be the orientation of our bridge, so that when we add this later on, right, our bridge should always have that arrow pointing upward, right? And you should be able to see these. Same with the front piece, right? The front piece is symmetrical, and the front piece is actually symmetrical in 3 axes. It's symmetrical left to right, top to bottom, although top to bottom is a much lower tolerance symmetry, and front to back. So you're going to pick a show face, which side you want it to be the outside, and pick a top or bottom. And it's relatively arbitrary, but again, you want to pick an orientation and stick with it. So I'm going to put an arrow like that. So I know this is my front, and this is my top surface. Okay? I don't need to do that on this sidewall, and I don't need to do it on the sole, because I already have very clear indications of what's top and what's bottom. Okay, so those are markings. Now on the sole, as we talked about a little before, we want to be sure that with the tongue and groove joint joined, that we're relatively coplanar, top to bottom. So the bottom faces should be within a few thousandths of in the same plane. So when you set this down on a surface plate or your flat surface, what you don't want is to see a large gap. Say, I'm going to exaggerate it, but if you're sitting and you see a large gap like this at the front, right, now we have an issue. And the way to fix that issue, assuming it's not so large that it needs to be swapped out, the way that we fix that is some selective filing of this tongue to allow things to sit coplanar, okay? And again, that tongue does not need to be tight, right? It's purely an alignment tool. Okay, so let's move on to marking the sidewall. First, we're going to put in the remaining portions of the dovetails for the front piece at either end. Right, as they arrive, these are milled as slots, but they are not yet filed with the tapers that you need to actually get a dovetail fit. Okay, so we need to mark specifically for that from our own piece. Okay, the bridge we're going to check fit, and then we're going to add a bit of taper from the outside edge so that when we peen this from the outside, it will also lock in place. So let's move over to the vise. It's easier to do that marking with the material in a vise.